Hello, everyone. Matthew is here, as always, with Cubic Dimensions. Christian is here, as always, as well. And today we have, well, a lot of bullshit to talk about. We're sorry that we missed last week. Christian couldn't make it, and then I had some stuff going on last minute that happened, and frankly, I just didn't feel like doing it. So that's what happened. I don't know what's going to happen next Sunday, and actually, maybe you and I can talk about this live towards the end, so everybody at least knows what's going on. We don't have to make some weird announcement that only 5 people will see.
Yeah.
That's the weekend of my moving into college, so and they have like a whole activities thing. So I don't know what exactly is going on with that. I might just not be here to host, and maybe Christian can host. Maybe bring on a guest or two, or we'll just have it for another day that week. Because I know that
Okay.
the following day of that Sunday is Labor Day, and as far as I know, they don't have anything planned for us. I don't have anything planned yet, so maybe we could do it then. I don't know. Pardon me. All right, but anyway, let's get to the nonsense of the week.
Good for nonsense.
So, first things first. Wait, Christian, you've highlighted the Obamacare failing thing.
Oh no, I was just copying it to open up links. That's why I have the stories open.
Sorry, but yeah, we have a Google Doc. It's complicated. So there's a lot of big stories. First, I actually want to talk about the FEC. So, as you guys can probably tell, if possibly at this point, I really like The Hill. The Hill, I think, is a relatively good source. It seems relatively balanced in terms of its reporting, at least did during the Democratic primary. It wasn't viciously pro-Hillary like basically every other one was. So, every like Politico and those ones. Not dismissing them, of course, though. So, headline from The Hill: FEC to fight fake candidates like, quote, D's nuts, unquote. Of course, there was that famous poll a while ago. I can't remember how many months ago it was, but it was recent enough that people knew Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were going to be the nominees. At least that's what it looked like. In North Carolina, Clinton got 38% in the poll, Trump 40%, and then D's nuts got 9%. And this was actually by Public Policy Polling, a very accredited polling agency, one I particularly like as well. And so let me read a little bit from the Hill article. So the FEC says it will no longer tolerate, quote, unlawfully false or fictitious, unquote, political candidates like D's nuts. The commission has authorized staff to send verification letters to filers listing fictional characters, obscene language, sexual references, celebrities, where this is no indication that the named celebrity submitted the filing, animals, or similarly implausible entities as the name or contact information of the candidate or committee, the agency said in a statement Thursday. So basically what that means is, in the past 20 so years, especially since the internet has been around, there's been a lot of silly political things where dogs have been elected mayor, cats have been elected mayor. In polls, especially in this election, people have said, oh, I'm voting for D's nuts. Or on the actual election day, there is an obscene amount of people writing in Mickey Mouse and things of that nature. So, what? I guess. Okay, first, before I get into my little rant, because of all the stories we're doing tonight, this is the one that I'm especially having a long rant for. I want Christian's perspective because it's different. Obviously, in Canada, you guys don't, you don't vote for a prime minister, so to speak. You vote for a candidate of a party to represent you in your constituency, and then whoever ends up winning the majority or becomes the government in whatever way, who is also elected leader through popular vote usually, becomes prime minister. It's kind of a indirect way of voting, but so I'm interested to view your perspective, because I don't know if there's a lot of ridiculous write-ins for like Mickey Mouse in Canada or not. It did
Well.
I just want to know, like, when I know that Tom Mulcair is being unseated from being the leader of the NDP, are there going to be a lot of people writing in Mickey Mouse because they don't like the other options?
So two things on that. The immediate one is that this is funny because Canada has a very entrenched, famous joke party, the NeoRhinoceros Party. And they've been around for 20 years, enough, like a considerable amount of people actually going to be members of their party, running in different ridings, ads. You're kind of told they exist in school, like they're very established. They're so established that one of their things is the party's official leader was a rhinoceros in the Montreal Zoo. And that rhino got moved to Brazil a few years ago. So the NeoRhinoceros Party added to its platform that if they were elected, they would invade Brazil to liberate their party leader. And the Brazilian government thought a major Canadian political party had put into its, plans to invade Brazil. And the Canadian government said, no, you're not going to win. Calm down.
So that's a way to start an international controversy.
Yeah. In my opinion, look, if you don't want these things to happen, well, these are a result of a disillusioned populace in a democratic country saying, like, look, I think that's a certain amount of your population saying, I think this democracy is a farce in a sense, so I will treat it the way I view it. That's how I kind of see these nuts and those kind of candidates. And that's why the NeoRhinoceros Party doesn't get that many votes, because I think enough Canadians feel that their democracy is not a joke, so they don't vote for them. That being said, the NeoRhinoceros Party is increasingly becoming like kind of serious, and it's weird. Anyway, besides the point. The other thing that's funny is, like, do you think people will write in joke candidates for the NDP? And it's kind of like, I don't know if you saw this. The Young Turks did a video recently about Jeremy Corbyn and, the having a a referendum on his leadership in the party. And Sank was like, oh, the people are going to come out and vote for him. In parliamentary democracies, that's not really a thing. It's like one day the party comes together and they choose a person. So, you have your whole, like, you have your different party conventions. We don't have all the voting up to that point. It's just the convention. And then you vote for everything at the convention. You're not going province by province. You literally just try to get people to join your side. So I don't think that's going to happen because you don't have a choice. You have to go with someone who's there. So yeah, that's all. That's my perspective.
Well, so here's my thing. So there is a more obvious point of people saying, yeah, I'm voting for these nuts because quite figuratively, the other two candidates are jokes. So I might as well vote for the literal joke because that's what this is, as you said earlier. My bigger problem is maybe it's just the phrasing that they're using, the Hill is using, but it really irks me to know that the FEC, they're big. They cover elections, like that's their thing. They are the Federal Election Commission. They monitor all elections in the United States. And their thing is, yeah, we're going to crack down on joke candidates. Maybe people wouldn't be voting for, and like saying they'd be voting for these joke candidates if this was a serious democracy. So why don't you start cracking down on the problems that make this democracy one that is failing, that is a joke to many people? Like, see, there are so many things, kind of like homelessness in the UK. I know big problem. There's a big problem with homelessness in the UK, and people sleeping in the streets and stuff like that. And so to fix that, local governments in Britain have put spikes on the ground, on paved ground, where homeless people typically sleep, so they don't sleep there. Wait, in what world does that solve the problem? It doesn't. Okay, here's the problem. Here's your trying to solve it. It just Mars. You're in Mars right now. You're headed towards Mars. The problem is still down here on Earth. That's what this is about. That's what's going on here. It's like, okay. It's like you're trying to shoot a target, and instead you turn around and shoot a chicken. Like it just like it does absolutely nothing to solve what you're trying to accomplish.
I think though, and maybe I'm getting too wide in my thinking here, but I think that's a thing I've noticed with a lot of like neoliberal politicians and policies. There's a problem, so we're going to do everything we can to cover up the problem, and we will call that the left wing, way to address it. And it's like, no, maybe you should like address the core of the issue. And it's like, but do we really want to do that? Like we got friends who are benefiting from what's creating this issue. I think that's it. It's like homelessness is a problem. So how do we deal with homelessness? Well, if people can't see the homeless people, then they won't complain about homelessness. And I see that with a lot of things. It's like another example might even be, I had one on my head when I started this rant and then I lost it. But maybe even you could even say Obamacare to some extent is that. We have a problem, we're going to get into this, I guess, where, healthcare, we have a private healthcare system that's unaffordable for people. So let's force people to buy the health insurance at a slightly subsidized rate. Hence, we've dealt with the issue, even though people will still go bankrupt from healthcare costs. Instead of saying, maybe we should just get rid of the private, maybe we should just have a public option so this isn't an issue. It's like, but do we really want that? I think that's, you go through a lot of issues, and I think a lot of neoliberal policies are kind of that. It's let's put a Band-Aid on the problem because we kind of want the problem to be there. We don't mind the problem. We just want people to have the illusion we're going to address it.
Well, see, that's the thing, is that I don't think it's even a Band-Aid on the problem. I think the problem is a cut on my arm and I put a Band-Aid on my leg. Like that's how completely off this is. Like how completely missing the target this is.
Way of putting it though would be, I think a better way of putting it would be, you keep cutting yourself because you have like a very sharp edge of your desk. So every time you go to type on your keyboard, you keep cutting your arm. So you put a Band-Aid on your arm, but then you keep cutting yourself and you never address the fact the desk is sharp. To me, that's sort of how I see it.
I think that's a better example. But all, sort of analogies aside,
yeah,
it's not like the FEC is a toothless commission.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, the plenty of commissions have got their funding cut, have had this and that and the other thing happen to them. These guys can just, I hate to say pull an Obama, but he's been using a lot of executive orders to his privilege. They can just do an executive order and be like, yeah, no more private money in politics. How about that? And yeah, that could get tied up in the courts, and that might not stay like that for. But it's a step in the right direction, and it's a step towards actual genuine candidates running and not being corrupted by the money that influences them. But no, instead they're going to crack down on joke candidates who people are supporting because they don't take the democracy seriously, because why should they? It really goes to the disconnect of those who run the government versus the actual voters, the actual constituents. because I talk to plenty of people around my town. It's a fairly conservative town, but the vast majority of people I have a discussion with about politics, they either say I'm voting third party or I'm not voting at all, because they can't stand either candidate. And even without that, like even if you weren't that, there's opinion polls screaming these are the two most unpopular candidates that are nominees in the history of polling for the president of the United States. If I'm not mistaken, at least every candidate, every nominee, since there's been polling, have at least had higher favorability ratings than unfavorability ratings, right?
Yeah.
Even if it differs. These guys, not only are both of their unfavorables higher than their favorables, they're drastically higher. So I don't know. That's end rant.
Have you ever thought you're both simultaneously a cuck feminist and a misogynistic alt-right guy at the same time because you hate Hillary and Trump?
Oh. Anarcho-capitalist socialist, thank you. All right, next on the agenda of more ranting. So big story. I believe either Politico or Washington Post broke it. Paul Manafort has resigned from the Trump campaign. This comes amid a lot of tumultuity. That's the word, if that's a word, among the hierarchy of the Trump campaign in the last few, I guess, weeks. Obviously, originally Corey Lewandowski was the campaign manager. Paul Manafort was brought on shortly thereafter, at least a month or two after. Lewandowski left or was asked to resign because of clashes with Manafort, who Lewandowski wanted Trump to be himself. Manafort didn't. He's more of a establishment Republican strategist. He wanted him to, get in the pivot to the election, general election stance, which of course he didn't. And allegedly Manafort got pretty pissed about that, and so he left. And now we have these no-name people who are running it. I think it's Kelly Conway, I think her name is, as well as some other guy who are now coming on, or they came on before Manafort left, and then like a week after he left. So there hasn't been a lot of name calling, at least as of yet, from either Manafort or Lewandowski against the Trump campaign. In fact, very supportive of the Trump campaign as a CNN contributor. Obviously, we have to wait to see what Manafort does. But what a lot of people are saying is this is indicative of a failing campaign. I mean, he's been running for president for about a year now, and he's already on his third campaign manager. Typically not a good sign. Typically, your campaign manager is the one person you're closest to, typically the person that stays on. There might be a few shifts, a few other shifts in the hierarchy, but typically the campaign manager stays on. So, and is typically close to the candidate. So whenever one changes, it's big. If they change twice, that's even bigger. Thoughts, Christian?
Favorite part of that article was Eric Drumpf's quote. Because he's like, I think my father didn't want to be, distracted by, whatever things Paul was dealing with. It's like, that's the most articulate man I have ever heard.
Yeah, we can always count on the Trump kids to say eloquent things.
Oh man, that was good. Yeah. look, if you look at the polls, you brought up his unfavorability numbers. Yeah, this is a failing campaign, I think, by any barometer. You're even starting to see some conservative radio show hosts like Trump, jumping ship. And you got people on Fox jumping ship.
Well, I just want to bring up, because I don't think we got to it last show, because I think it happened after the last show. But Donald Trump was on Hugh Hewitt, who's one of the radio commentators, is actually on his side. And Trump had said Obama had founded ISIS and Hillary Clinton had founded ISIS. And Hugh Hewitt, actually, to his credit, was quite at least knowledgeable in how ISIS came to be. And he said, oh, granted, it was Bush that made the vacuum, not Obama, but nevertheless, he said, no, I got what you were saying. You were saying that Obama's responsible for the power vacuum that let ISIS come to be. And Trump just goes unequivocally, no, he's the founder of ISIS. And he's like, but no, you mean that metaphorically, right? Like, he gave him a third chance. And Trump's like, no, I literally meant Obama founded ISIS.
He was sitting down there in the White House with Hillary Clinton, and they're like, I got an idea. That's totally what happened. Yeah. It's it's a failing campaign, I think, by any barometer. I think they'd be stupid not to try and shake up the staff in some way, because you can't get rid of Trump, the main problem. So you might as well look at the other things you can potentially fix. But nonetheless, there's this saying, I'm sure anyone who's watching, and certainly you've heard it, Trump is running against the only person he could have ever beaten, and Hillary Clinton's running against the only person she could have ever beaten. And I think that's really what's going on right now, because both are viewed so unfavorably, but Trump's allowing whatever shot he had to blow open his face. Like, that's what it, and I probably isn't where you wanted to go, but I think it's something that I read for last week before we ultimately didn't do the show. But I ultimately think it's kind of damaging, because I think it tricks too many people within the Democratic Party into thinking, see, we didn't need Bernie Sanders or any of that kind of stuff. We can still keep doing what we were always doing. So I think the danger for the Democrats is thinking that Hillary Clinton's an okay candidate. I think that's the danger, is them thinking that, and then going forward, because I don't think the Republicans are going to change, of course, come the next election or the election after that. But they might just put a better face on it. Well, they most certainly will, because I don't think they could do much worse than what they. You got Donald Trump with his main advisor having been like a pro-Russian Ukrainian government guy. Like, that's I don't think they can do worse. But they'll put a better face on that.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't think the Democrats are going to learn the lesson that what they're currently doing is not being well received. It just so happens that the alternative is so ill received that most people are willing to deal with Clinton, which I don't think should be considered a win. It should be considered a close call.
And that's what, a lot of people, because of Trump, are saying, oh, this is the end of the Republican Party. And, as you're pointing out, it looks like it might be the end of the Democratic Party, too. Like this, and people say that, very offhandedly, I think, sometimes too much, because 2 years ago people were saying this is the end of the Republican Party, and look what happened there. So I'm a little hesitant to say that. I think it's the end of people really taking voting seriously, as we were talking about earlier, because obviously people don't want to vote for either of these guys. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something, I promise. And I can't remember. I lost my train of thought.
Very powerful to say, something amazing.
Something the greatest thing to ever say. The greatest. China could have said something better, but I was going to say something best.
Yeah.
I definitely think. Oh yeah. So I definitely think it makes Democrats complacent. Those who supported Hillary in the primary, I think it definitely makes them complacent in thinking this is, because she can now beat him. Oh, then we're safe. No, we're still going to get, another 4 years of, at least, another 4 years of, okay, cool, I guess. When's the real change coming?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Because that's how I view the last almost 8 years now, is that they weren't horrible, but at the same time, they weren't great.
Mhm.
It's like getting a burger at McDonald's. It's like, like, it's not terrific, but it's not awful. And while you can't taste what's going on, it's slowly killing you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of how I see this sort of train going. And I mean, you could say that for the Bush years too, and for Bill Clinton years, and all the way back to Nixon, really.
Yeah.
But the larger point I was going to make is that, so obviously this this whole switch up draws into question the whether Trump can win. And I saw an interesting thing that a man who I sometimes disparage because he can be a bit kooky, but I think he might actually be right on this. Is and I can't remember his name for the life of me. It's like his first and last name. His names are alliterative, and they begin with an M.
I got no idea who you're
He's like a
talking about.
leftist movie maker. Oh my god, I hate myself for not remembering what his
Oh,
name
is he
is.
like the bigger guy who's a bit older? He made like Bowling for Columbine. You're thinking of him?
Yes, that's him.
I can't remember his name.
All right. I'm looking up. 1 second. I feel so stupid. All right. Come on. Load.
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. There, Michael Moore. That's who I was thinking of. Michael Moore. So Michael Moore, I forget. I can't find the story, but this is sort of a same discussion that we're having about Paul Manafort. He had about the Paul Manafort story. He said in some sort of interview that he thinks Trump is purposely sabotaging his own campaign. Now, that suggests Trump is smart enough to do that. So that's up for debate. But what he was saying is that he's trying to get more money for the shows that he does. And that was pretty clear in 2011 when he said he might be running for president in 2012 and he did the whole birther thing. Is that he ended up making a lot more money for hosting The Apprentice, and in his book deals and basically everything. And of course, Trump's big thing is that he wants to make more money. Now, he's not doing himself any favors by, at least for some of the part, self-funding his campaign. So I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously, there's also conspiracy theories that Bill Clinton got him to run because he knew somehow through some voodoo that Trump would ultimately win the nomination and then make a pathway for Hillary to win the presidency, which would be credible if Bill Clinton somehow had the foreknowledge that Trump would be able to ride a populist message and win, but Bernie Sanders wouldn't. So that, and maybe it's because, and maybe that could be actually true because, and against 16 other people who, that really divvies up the establishment vote. That really divvies up the vote between the Trump people and the anti-Trump people, as we saw when it whittled down to Cruz and Kasich, and they stopped. They started basically campaigning for each other, but didn't have the pride to bow out and just have one of the other ones run. So, but I'm more inclined to believe that Trump just wants more money from this, especially if he's reached the point like I don't see a point of any return. I really don't see a point of any return with Trump unless voter turnout is absolutely horrendous, and I'm talking like 30%, like really low, like midterm level low. Unless it's that bad, and somehow that he is able to squeak out a win that way, I don't see how he can get out of this alive. Really. I don't see how he can win this.
I've heard that as insofar as him making money, it's because he's kind of reached the point where he knows he's not going to win. So he's just trying to get as much money into his kids as possible. And he's just going to retire to like one of his mansions and just call it a day. Like that's probably the smart route right now, to be honest. Just save you as much. I think that's part of the reason he's switching his advisors, I've heard, because he's taken a much softer tone since the switch. He started like almost making apologies about some of the worst things he said.
Well, he literally
I
did.
think that's what he's. Yeah. So
well,
I think there's some chance. Go ahead.
So, sorry, I was just going to say I think that's more the RNC pushing him, and him
Mhm.
kind of have to do that because he still needs other people's money.
Yeah.
And like if Trump had his way, Lewandowski never would have quit. He'd still be campaign manager, and Trump would still be like having foot and mouth syndrome so bad that his foot is coming out his ass like that. So I think it has more to do with money. But sorry to cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was just gonna say that it doesn't matter at this point. It's irrelevant. I don't even remember fully
Sure?
what I was getting
All
to
right.
anymore. Anyway,
All right.
it's all good, man.
But that's at least my perspective is that I don't think this is a chicken or the egg thing because I think we can. What are you doing?
Nothing.
Okay.
Anyway,
So let's
continue.
ignore the man with the Darth Vader helmet on his head. Anyway, I think that it's a chicken or the egg thing. Either he started this campaign actually wanting to win, and now he's like, all right, screw it, I just want to make as much money off this as possible, or it was from the beginning, I want to make as much money off of this as possible.
And then it got out of hand, and then he was like, I guess I'll make as much money as I can off it as possible now that I'm here.
Yeah. And I think I'm more inclined to believe it's the former rather than the latter. It's he now realizes he can't win, so he's just trying to make money.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there is, he has obviously manipulated the system a lot, as in his lifetime. And what better way to manipulate the system than to go to the people who make the system directly, the voters, and manipulate them that way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, but I guess this could be my last thought on the topic. But I mentioned how I think part of the reason Trump could even exist was how the Republicans allowed people before him to water down the legitimacy of their primary process. Because they had guys running who were simply there to sell books. They had people running there who were simply there to promote their television careers, like Huckabee. I think that's part of the, and that's why I think part of it is he ran just to like get the name out there, make his contract better for when they renewed The Apprentice and all that. And then it just kind of got out of hand. And I was like, I guess I'll make money off of this. Now they realizes he can't win. I think that's so I think it's all the Republicans' fault and the media machine they've created. But in particular, I think that's one facet of the mistakes they made is they allowed other people before him to basically make their primary process a joke.
Yeah, and that adds evidence to why I think, whether it was one or the other, that he's in this to make money. A lot of, I think, especially this year, a lot of people were just in it to get the book deals, as you said, and get the television deals, because there were like 8 of them that had already run before and had no chance of winning. But they ran anyway because they wanted the money.
Yeah.
They wanted the fame. There were some there who actually did want to win through some weird, idea that they could win, like Chris Christie and Jeb Bush. But
Jeb.
Jeb. On that note, actually, I don't know if you saw, there was a kid who found him on Boylston Street in Boston, just like wandering around at night. It was like, hey, dude, like, what are you doing around here? And he's like, oh, I just had dinner with a friend and now I'm headed back to my hotel. But the kid was like, it really looked like he was just wandering around aimlessly. Is that what happens to like defeated presidential candidates? Do they just walk around aimlessly in America's major cities?
He's just doing like the Forrest Gump thing, except he's walking between private jet flights between cities.
Or more like a smooth pace of confusion and curiosity.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's get to the next story. Probably the biggest story of the last week. And CNN has a good thing about it. When one of their reporters was reporting on it, I will pull up her name. But she, on air, got very emotional about it. Let's see, what's her name?
It's a great name.
All right.
I'm so happy you waited for this name.
I can't find it at the moment, but that's besides the point. If you haven't seen this already, I don't know what rock you're living under, but this boy by the name of Omron, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Omron. He was one of, unfortunately, the many victims of the Syrian civil war when a bomb landed on his house, crushing his siblings. I believe he has a brother and sister, and his parents underneath the rubble of their former house. And there's a video that's gone viral of rescue workers pulling him from the wreckage. He's covered in the dust of the rubble to the point that he looks like he's a statue. And he's clearly bleeding on the side of his head. There's some blood in his hair. And a rescue worker sits him down in the ambulance and then runs off to help other people. And he just kind of stares blankly. Not at the camera, but just stares blankly, like that 1,000-yard stare sort of thing. He looks around a little bit. I think he plays with his hair at one point, but for the most part, he's just in utter shock. And I have trouble looking at it. I am a avid reader and watcher of war films and books and TV shows and whatnot, and I find it very interesting. I find the portrayal of how awful war is very interesting. I don't often get emotional, but when I saw this, it was hard to look at. It was hard to stomach. And obviously, if you've seen it, I think you know why I'm kind of a little bit difficult to try to come up with words to properly talk about this, because it's a very, it's just, we see, this isn't Vietnam. We were constantly getting, for lack of a better word, bombarded by video and pictures of the war, showing how awful it was. and showing how wrong the things that we were doing and that we were letting this happen. That hasn't happened this time. That didn't happen in Iraq. That didn't happen in Afghanistan. Frankly, and maybe that's understandable because Syria really isn't our war necessarily. But that, and you gotta, you see Omron, and you just gotta think, I have to do something about that. Like, why are we letting this happen? Why is a kid who is probably no older than my little brother, why is he now scarred for life, possibly even dead now? Probably every bone broken in his body. His entire family is probably dead. Why are we letting that happen? And I'm not suggesting military intervention. The exact opposite. I am suggesting humanitarian intervention. Because this is, it's just downright wrong. And it really, the first thing I did when I saw that story was that I shared it, obviously on Facebook, on my social media, and I wrote, what's that about killing all the ragheads again? Because I hear so many people just casually saying, yeah, kill all the ragheads, kill all the towelheads, just, let them all die. Middle East is ridiculous, is a shitstorm, and we might as well just let them go to hell. We should just bomb the hell out of the place. And I see Omron, I see, obviously that poor refugee kid who was washed up on that island in Greece. I can't understand how people could possibly look at that, how people could possibly see that, or even have knowledge of war, how awful war is to begin with, and think, yeah, they deserve it, or yeah, let them have it, or let them have more. And then they get angry when they for some reason think that we're not doing anything, we're not bombing. I don't know, because when I see that kid, I think we need to stop bombing. Violence,
I think a lot of people are very capable of viewing that kid as an other, though. And I think that's what separates perhaps you and me from a more conservative, well, to not be mean, a more conservative person. Because I think you and I can look at that kid and understand that's it was just like, as in your case, you said, my little brother. But I think for a lot of people to say that's somebody else. And they can do that to people in their own country even. There's this pastor in Louisiana, and you have the whole big flooding going on in Louisiana. And when he was talking about New Orleans, when that happened, he was saying, this is God punishing the people of New Orleans. They deserve this. They had it coming. Then what happened to him, it's God's way of making us closer to him. I think that's the thing, is I think there's a lot of people who will see that kid and say, he's another. I don't care. His dad's probably a terrorist. His older brother's probably a terrorist. They had it coming. And he's a bystander, but war has, collateral damage. And they shrug it off. I think that's part of it. I think there's also another group of people who are more like Harris or Bill Maher types who say, look, I think our military is totally capable of doing the kind of designated strikes that avoid these kids being hurt. It's naive, but I think there's also another camp of people who can do that. So I think you have those two camps of people, and that's 2/3 of the populace, and you end up with 2/3 of the people looking at that kid and saying, shrug. And I think that's why you don't get the results you want.
I hate to make an appeal to emotion, but because it's often, a very similar argument is often used in defense of the death penalty. But, I look at what Hillary Clinton says, what she does, what she supports. Because, even in the primary season, she was like, yeah, well, we need to destroy ISIS and blah, blah, blah. And of course, during the Democratic convention, they made all these overtures to people for the sake of national security, having a bunch of retired generals and admirals talking to national security people. Obviously, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, so big foreign policy focus. And John Allen comes to mind when he was screaming about making our enemies pay and blah blah blah, which I don't know like who our enemies are to begin with. Like, you got to be more specific. There are a lot of people who don't like us, but I just see them screaming about that, and I wonder, how can you say that and then not look at this kid and think that could have been my kid? Hillary Clinton's a mother. How could you look at that boy and say that could have been Chelsea? Or Donald Trump. Donald Trump. How does he not look at that kid and say that could have been Eric?
That could have
been Donald
brilliant,
Jr.
magnificent, amazing son, Eric.
It's I just don't understand why. And then they look at that and think, oh yeah, more bombs are necessary. I know you bring up a good point that they can kind of justify it in their head that way, but maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the way I think, but that's not the first thought that comes to my mind when I see that.
Yeah.
Is we gotta bomb more, we gotta kill more people. The first thing I see when that happens is, Jesus Christ, can't we get that kid like a Band-Aid? Like, can't we get that? Can we put him in a stretcher? Can we get him to Mass General? Can we give him a lollipop at least so he has something to look forward to? Like, Jesus Christ! And the first thought to your head is, oh yeah, well, we got to drop more bombs. Where did that come from?
There was a fascinating. I know how you like The Hill, but I like Foreign Policy, and they had a very interesting.
I like Foreign Policy too.
Okay, good. They had this. I'm not disparaging The Hill. I'm just saying I like Foreign Policy as much as you like The Hill. Although I know it came off way more passive aggressive than that.
No.
They had a discussion because someone had written a book. One of the contributors to Foreign Policy had written a book, how the military became everything, how everything became war, and how the military became everything. I think is the name of the book. And she was saying that a big problem with how the U.S. views foreign policy is that the military, because every facet of the government, well, not every, but so many facets of the government are underfunded, and the military is so overfunded, the military becomes the only branch of the U.S. government capable of doing anything effectively. It becomes the only branch of the government capable of actually being on the ground, having an impact. And I think that's part of the reason Hillary Clinton, when she's such a big foreign policy wonk, she becomes pro-war. It's because in the U.S., because that's the only tool the U.S. has for foreign policy right now, well, obviously you become pro-military and pro-war because the military is the only thing the U.S. currently has that can do anything. And I think that's part of the problem, is that because you have because so many people, I think, view more humanitarian responses as somehow being UN conspiracies and all that kind of stuff, you become incapable of act, because the answer to every crisis isn't the military. There are going to be instances where the military is the answer, but it can't be the answer to everything. And I think Syria is a case of that. And the problem is because the U.S. it gets undervalue soft power, only the military as a means of achieving foreign policy goals. But at the end of it, when you're playing Civ, there are more tools at your disposal than your tanks. And I don't think enough people understand that. And I think it's become so internalized that even people in the U.S. government, as high up as Hillary Clinton, no longer understand that. There are other tools at your disposal, and sometimes you have to use those other tools. And I think in Syria and Iraq, this is a perfect example of the U.S. only has one tool and it is the wrong tool. They're using a hammer when you need a scalpel. And I think it's tragic that I don't think this kid will have any effect on that. Because look, a dead kid washing up in Greece wasn't enough. An alive kid certainly is not going to have the effect if that's the case. So I don't know, but I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think he will have an effect because, you know, there are plenty of people who look at, you know, what ISIS has done to people, the horrible atrocities they've done, and they immediately think, you know, oh, we need to bomb more. Like, they're not gonna look at Omron, as we've discussed, and view it in the same way we are, that we need to stop doing that. It's definitely going to have an effect. It's just going to have the wrong effect. It's going to have the effect of we need to do more by bombing more. You know, Hillary Clinton has paid a lot of lip service to humanitarian corridors. I don't even know what the hell that means. Maybe I need to read up on it. But as a foreign policy wonk myself, I don't even know what the hell she's talking about. Good luck getting a humanitarian corridor, whatever that means, in the middle of friggin' ISIS. Good luck. But, like, I just want to know that there's something that, you know, someone on the Clinton team, hopefully, that's saying, hey, when we get into office, let's make sure that we're sending these people bread. We're sending these people medical supplies. Because at the end of the day, say the Syrian government steals it, right? Say we send medical supplies over to Syria, it's meant for the rebels or it's meant for the civilians, and the government takes it. Yeah, that's not getting the people that we wanted it to get to, but it's still helping people. It's still, you know, healing people who shouldn't be dying, people who are dying in a senseless, needless war. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't know.
I think,
but I think you're right. It'll probably have the wrong effect.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the military is everything, and it's the only tool you can have. Then that's what you're going to send in to deal with the problem you see.
Yep. Well, speaking of the only sane person, at least seemingly only sane person with big name recognition, in American politics, Bernie Sanders. So I'm going to read from yet another article from The Hill. I don't think I just solely rely on Hill. It just so happens that I see the story first on The Hill, and so I just click on it and I use that as the story. So here the article is called, quote, Bernie Care Can Save Obamacare. So I believe it's an opinion. Yeah, it's an opinion piece. So I'm not going to rely on it too much for facts, but basically what this is talking about is, so Aetna, I believe it's how you pronounce it.
Mhm.
Aetna, I don't know. Healthcare company recently this week pulled out of the Obamacare exchanges, which obviously outraged a lot of people, got a lot of people angry about that. And supposedly, a few days later, there was like a leaked memo or something like that that said it's because the federal government denied that company's merger with Humana, which is completely understandable considering they're both big prescription drug companies. So why would you want that Comcast Time Warner thing?
Yay for monopolies.
Woo. Anyway, so this started up yet another conversation about the public option, which we really haven't talked about since Obamacare was implemented, because Obama basically completely vetoed any discussion of that because he wanted to try to get Republicans along with it, and of course, no Republican ended up voting for Obamacare. Nice, smooth. Anyway, so what And so now Bernie Sanders, so this opinion piece came out, and then Bernie Sanders started coming out and saying, hey, I have this public option plan. How about we use it? That way Obamacare doesn't get screwed over. Because that's been the big worry, right? It's already, Obamacare has survived the nitpicking and stripping of judicial courts, of the Congress, and the only other thing Republicans can do really at this point is if they get a president elected, if they hold on to the Senate, if they hold on to the House, repealing it that way. That looks very unlikely. Another reason why they don't want Trump, the establishment doesn't want Trump, because they know he's not going to win. That means Obamacare is probably going to stay. And then the other thing is, oh, I lost my train of thought. So
you go.
huh?
Nothing. You seem to have found it again.
So Bernie Sanders is bringing this up. Oh yeah, so Obamacare has survived all those sort of legislative and judicial challenges. Now the only thing it really has to worry about is healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies pulling out of the exchanges, which for the most part hasn't been much of a problem until this happened. And what Bernie Sanders is proposing is that we have an option to cut out the middleman. We're not necessarily cutting out the middleman, because we already know that single payer, not going to happen. People are completely opposed to that, or at least those at the federal level. Enough people are. But let's have a public option where people can buy healthcare from the government. That way, if the doomsday scenario happens, where all these healthcare companies, they don't get the subsidies they want, they don't get the mergers they want, as in this case, they don't get the tax incentives that they want, start pulling out left and right, and then all of a sudden you have exchanges with no companies, with no public-private partnerships. Then you have no Obamacare's dead. Like, there's no point in having it because it is a completely toothless program. So what Bernie Sanders is proposing is, even if that doomsday scenario happens, we'll at least have the public option where people who can't afford health care from private insurers will be able to get health care from the government. I forget exactly what the healthcare situation is in Canada, so I'd like your perspective, because I'm sure you guys probably, I have the feeling though you guys figured this out like 70 years ago, so.
Yeah. 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 I don't know what to say. Like, I just find it's just so weird, because on one hand, as a Canadian, you don't want the US to get public health care, because like that's our like claim to like fame. Is we get, every time we come down, it's like we get to wag it in your face a bit.
Well, okay, can you just clear something up for myself in the audience? Real quick, sorry to interrupt. Do you have just the public option, or is it strictly single payer? There are no healthcare providers except the government.
It is strictly single payer.
Okay. Now
I think, yeah, province of Quebec might have some private clinics, but aside from that, it's single payer.
All right, I have to go. I have to go for a second, but yes, continue on your Canadian perspective.
Okay. I guess I'm gonna give it anyways. But yeah, I was gonna say, I find it funny that you would have an entire country of people, not an entire country, you have like the entire Western world saying, yo, this works. We're pretty happy with this. Statistically, it works. Like, let's remember, the US has the most expensive healthcare system in the Western world. Like, you guys aren't even saving money on this. You might say, oh, what? Well, my taxes aren't going towards it, so how is our system more expensive if private companies are carrying it? Or you might say, well, I knew Obamacare would mess it up, but no, it was more expensive before Obamacare, and it still is the most expensive with it. It's just cheaper. The thing is, you're paying an inflated price for your healthcare. because no one's making a profit off of it in a single payer system. So you pay a cheaper cost for your healthcare. And that leads to, yeah, and just statistically that it ends up so happening that the single payer system is cheaper for it. Because you individually end up having to pay for it. Now you might say, well, I am a 20-year-old individual who didn't have health problems, so why would I want to have to pay for somebody else's healthcare? Okay, fair enough. But you're going to be 40 at some point, and you're going to wish you paid for it. So pay for it. That's all I can say. So at the end of the day, single payer is cheaper, and the quality of care is pretty good. Like, it's true. It's true. If you happen to so be... There's this joke. Not this joke. There's a saying that Americans don't view themselves as poor or middle class. They view themselves as temporarily unlucky millionaires. Because it's true in the US, if you are a millionaire, you can have some of the best healthcare in the world. The simple fact of the matter is that most Americans aren't millionaires. So you end up with a quality of care that is comparable to or lower than what someone in a single payer system has, but you're paying, I think, 3 times more. More than the next most expensive single payer system, which might be the Canadian one, I'm not sure. So at the end of the day, you have comparable to or lower quality of care, and you pay 3 times more for it. Why do you want a private? Like, why? And I understand on a government level why people are so married to a private system. It's because, once again, there's a lot. These private healthcare insurance companies are not money groups you want to go against as a politician. So you don't want to do anything so heavy that it would threaten their business model, because then they would not give you money, or they would give money to primary opponents. I understand that, but at least for the public's sake, I don't see why you'd be against the public option.
That's why the FEC needs to stop cracking down on joke candidates and crack down on money in politics. We've come full circle.
Yeah, we've come full circle. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm pretty sure what you said, I agree with. So.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I'll just tell you this. I didn't say it though my rant. CBC in the I think 2007-ish, might have done this. They did like a Canada-wide year-long study of who Canadians think the most important Canadian is. And you might think, oh, it'll be the first prime minister, or oh, it'll be the prime minister who got us out of the Great Depression. No, it was the MP from Saskatchewan who invented the public healthcare system.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
I got nothing else to say.
I wonder if there is something like that for the United States. I mean, people would probably say Abraham Lincoln or FDR, but I don't know. Maybe Martin Luther King Jr. I don't know.
Maybe.
So anyway, I guess that wraps that discussion up. I think we're pretty. There's not a lot of disagreements or anything like that there. I think, that last second where I jumped in just a few seconds ago really sums up what needs to be done. Obviously, it's a little bit harder because that, requires the FEC and the Democratic Party to have backbone, which is, just so demanding. So
it gets to something I often say to my conservative friend, and she doesn't. I don't think she disagrees with me on this, but I say, look, you can't have an honest discussion about U.S. politics until you first address the money in politics issue, because that affects everything else. It's part of the reason I find some Clinton supporters frustrating. So, like, well, Bernie Sanders is worse on gun control. It's like, okay, maybe he is, but I think the money in politics issue trumps everything. Like, if the Republicans even ran a candidate who's kind of meh on a lot of issues, but he said, I'm very heavily like my main thing will be money in politics. Like, okay, I'll vote for that guy, because then we can have an honest discussion about everything else after he's addressed that. Then I think we have a much more interesting debate about every other issue, because even things the left has won on, like gay marriage, that was money in politics that decided that. That wasn't necessarily public opinion winning that. I think it's important that we remember that. So I think that's a very important thing, looking at is that's got to come first. We can't look at a candidate who's good on some other things and say we're going to go with them because we don't like the other guy on some of these issues if the other guy is in favor of money in politics. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what anyone's ideas are. It doesn't matter, because money's going to decide ultimately in which way that politician goes. So we got to address money in politics first. Then we can have an honest discussion.
Amen. All right. Next up, we are going to talk about something Christian wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah!
Because my last story is kind of irrelevant. It really wasn't that important.
Okay.
So let's talk about Christian's slightly more relevant topic, an important topic.
So, little known fact, I'm trying to be a sci-fi writer, so I follow a lot of like cutting edge science and technology stuff. So there was an English scientist by the name of Roger Scheuer who developed something called an EM drive in the early 2000s. And basically what it is it's a microwave kind of dish that bounces, particles back and forth. And it actually creates propulsion by just bouncing these particles around, which sounds ridiculous because, in effect, what you're doing is flying by pulling on your own shoes, which, go downstairs and try it if you like. We'll wait for you. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Sad, unfortunate to tell you. So everyone, of course, thought Roger Scheuer was crazy because that's basically what he was proposing. But a few years later, some Chinese researchers decided, let's just... it's China. Things are going good right now. Let's just throw some money at a crazy idea and see what happens. And they're like, what the heck? This worked. Someone's like, okay, bunk science from China. We're not going to deal with this. So NASA, about a year or two ago, decided they got some money from a guy named Harold White, an investor, who said, okay, let's just see what happens. He's interested. He gave us the money to work on it. It's America. If someone pays us to do something, we'll do it. We'll try it. And it worked. And they're like, what the heck, this worked. So NASA got it to work. And then today, not today, but a few days ago, German researchers also made their own EM drive, and they got it to work. And what's crazy about the German findings is the crazy statistics that Roger Scheuer said the crazy numbers Roger Scheuer had proposed in the early 2000s with the original concept came out to be true. So what this would mean is that we could go to Mars and back in 70 days. We could get to and from the moon in 4 hours. That's pretty crazy. It's crazy for a lot of reasons, not just because space exploration for the sake of space exploration would be more affordable because you don't have to build extremely expensive rocket engines which burn tons of fuel and you only use them once. The other big thing is it makes things like asteroid mining possible. If you don't know why that's important, it's important because Earth has finite resources. In a capitalist system, you must constantly expand and use more resources. There comes a crossover point where those lines don't like each other anymore. So if you had asteroid mining, you could address the issue of not having enough resources to keep expanding. So anyways, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't like the big reason right now the EM drive is not further along than it is because it works, but we don't know why. And humans tend not, in our modern scientific community, for good reason, we tend not to try and move forward on things if we don't understand how they work. So we have this drive that makes no sense. It goes against every law of physics we have, but nonetheless it works. But it's important to remember that something the person who's writing this article points out. It's up until Einstein. Well, Einstein broke a lot of laws of physics with his theories, but they turned out to be correct. This will go against some of Einstein's stuff because this shouldn't work. But you know what? We've been proven wrong in the past, and we're built on the shoulders of giants, as Newton said. So I found it interesting. I thought it was worth mentioning that story.
The
Good
Earth
news to
revolves.
counterbalance the depressing stuff we did for the rest of the show.
The sun revolves around the Earth.
Yep.
The
The
Earth
Earth is at
is
the center.
flat.
Is at the center of the universe.
No, I think what is EM stand for?
One sec. It might be in the article.
I find it fascinating because that's, you know, if we were to try to get to Mars in standard spacecraft now, it would take how many years? I don't know. It would literally take years. It takes a while to get to the moon, let alone Mars. And then with this, it's like, oh yeah, getting to the moon is going to be about as long as it takes you to take a plane from Boston to Disney World.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty big. That's pretty big.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know
is
why
pretty
more
big.
people aren't talking about this, because this is really. I know it's partially because we don't fully understand what's going on, but I find it incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. So EM stands for electromagnetic drive.
I thought so.
That's
I
what it
thought
is.
so. Typically, that's what a lot of things tend to be with propulsion and whatnot is electromagnets, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Honestly, I think this could be a really revolutionary way to look at travel. I think, because other than that, the best thing we have is either nuclear fusion, which we can't really do yet, and
Mm-hmm.
using artificial gravity. But that basically means, all right, you want to get away from Earth, you have to use at least the same amount of gravity that the Earth is pulling you down. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to use the same exact going the opposite direction. That's pretty hard to come up with. And
Yeah.
that doesn't even take into account, if you want to get somewhere, where are you going? How are you
Yeah.
going to get there? Can you somehow change the gravity of whatever you're using, this gravity generate? And so that's even worse. That's even more theoretical than nuclear fusion is, because at least we know you can do nuclear fusion. We just need to find a way to contain it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's hard to think about how close we are to getting to where we want to be with technology, because it's the same thing with like genetic engineering. Because if we can really figure out genetic engineering, the implications of that are very difficult to fathom, because that's like theoretically that's immortality if you can figure out how to really do genetic engineering. This is another one of those things, like if we could really figure out how to work, that's like we could go to Mars like for your like summer holidays. Like that's ridiculous. So I don't know. I just don't know. I just find it interesting to think. It's just we need some good stuff to talk about on the show. That's what I'm doing. We need some like hope to counterbalance all the like.
Honestly, if I am alive to see that, I am going to be absolutely ecstatic, because number one, it's one way to get away from Trump. That's a good way to escape. Forget going to Canada, because Canada is probably going to become a parking lot by the time he gets into office. So same thing with everywhere else on Earth. So might as well just hop on the next ticket to the far side of the moon, because that's where that's the only place people are going to be able to live.
It's random side note, I suppose, to leave that on. So Canadian government, little known fact, and I think the US government does this as well, has writes up like defense doctrines for possible wars against other countries. The US does this as well, obviously. And the last time Canada made one for the US was in the 1920s. And because Trump is running, they're writing one up again for the first time since then. So it's like, oh, that's pleasant. That's a nice thought.
Yeah. Next thing you know, I'm going to be vacationing in New Hampshire in 2017. All of a sudden, a Mountie's going to come down the street.
Like, all right, preemptive strike.
We're annexing New Hampshire.
You guys, trust me, we're doing it more for you than for us.
New Hampshire? No, South Canada.
South Canada. South Ontario now.
All right. Well, if that's the thought Joy's thought we're going to leave this on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us as usual. Something's going to happen next Sunday, maybe. Maybe it will be Monday. I don't know. Does that work for you? If we maybe do Monday, next Monday instead of Sunday? Huh?
Usually work Mondays. I don't know. We'll see. I might.
Well, I know. I'm
ask
pretty sure
to not work next week.
I'm pretty sure I couldn't do it Saturday.
Yeah.
So we'll figure something out.
We'll follow us on Facebook, and we'll keep you posted.
Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please join us next week at some point. And as always, remember, have malice toward none.